4:30, June 17, 1944, Western Pacific Front. Japanese planners enter the day certain that the sector held by a Black American regiment will break under sustained pressure. Their assumption shapes the entire offensive, directing veteran troops toward what is expected to be the weakest point in the line. Within hours, initial battle reports defy their projections. The regiment blocks the advance, disrupts coordination, and forces enemy analysts to reassess core beliefs that guided their strategy. A moment designed to confirm doctrine instead exposes its instability, leaving a gap between expectation and reality that demands explanation. Stories formed at moments like this deserve reflection. Subscribe and like the video to stay with Battlefront Insider so that you do not miss out on the most hidden parts of war. Japanese military analysts categorize opponents through racial doctrine, blending propaganda with selective intelligence. Reports classify Black American regiments as untested, implying that morale and discipline decline rapidly under pressure. These assessments circulate through command networks, influencing strategy with confidence that such sectors can be easily overrun. Within the U.S. Army, segregation policy divides manpower along racial lines. Black regiments, though part of the same national force, receive inferior equipment and outdated training schedules. Many are assigned to logistical or construction roles, reinforcing perceptions that they are unfit for frontline duty. These structures create measurable disadvantages that extend beyond combat readiness into morale and trust. Leaders within the regiment understand that any performance failure will confirm the very prejudice that shapes their treatment. Every order carries a dual weight, tactical consequence and racial judgment. Unease grows as they prepare for deployment, aware that their position has symbolic value beyond the battlefield. Strategic reality forces an unexpected assignment. The island chain's location compels commanders to fill every defensive zone, and available units become resources rather than reputations. Despite hesitation, the Black Regiment receives responsibility for a sector guarding a vital approach route. Their success or failure will determine not just immediate survival but the perception of competence attached to thousands who share their uniform color. Nearby American units respond with cautious curiosity. Some express skepticism about whether the regiment can withstand prolonged contact. Others quietly observe, waiting for results that might alter long-held assumptions. Japanese reconnaissance interprets the regiment's defensive preparations as signs of inexperience. Slow construction and visible fatigue are logged as weakness rather than overextension. These errors embed themselves in enemy planning, shaping an offensive built on overconfidence. By the time both sides finalize their expectations, misunderstanding has become structural. One army underestimates an opponent through doctrine. The other undervalues its own soldiers through policy. Both are preparing for a battle neither fully understands. Both forces misread the regiment for different reasons, setting the stage for a collision where perception and reality will violently diverge. Japanese command, convinced of the regiment's weakness, accelerates plans for a decisive strike. Intelligence summaries describe the defensive sector as limited in endurance, encouraging rapid exploitation. Preparations for the offensive gain momentum while Allied communication channels lag behind. The regiment receives minimal reinforcement. Requests for additional artillery and replacement vehicles are delayed, diverted to higher priority zones. Each denial reinforces a sense that the system expects little from them. Officers attempt to compensate by tightening coordination and extending shifts, but fatigue accumulates faster than recovery. Enemy infiltration units test the line, probing for response times. Every engagement reveals logistical shortages, insufficient ammunition, irregular food supply, limited medical rotation. Reports filter upward, but command responses emphasize patience rather than intervention. The gap between need and acknowledgement grows into frustration that feels systemic. On neighboring fronts, American formations absorb heavy losses. The shifting perimeter pushes additional defensive weight onto the Black Regiment. They inherit an exposed flank and must maintain control with no increase in manpower. Small tactical victories carry no relief, as supply chains remain strained and communication failures multiply. Field officers observe their units operating with incomplete intelligence. Patrols return without contact, only to find enemy scouts have already mapped their fallback routes. The confusion breeds caution but also sharpens determination among those aware that hesitation invites collapse. Japanese strategists interpret these internal disruptions as confirmation of weakness. Overconfidence strengthens their assault plan, a large-scale attack aimed at overwhelming the sector through relentless pressure rather than precision. The regiment's leadership understands what this means. They are positioned to face an offensive born not from tactical necessity but from racial presumption. Every soldier knows retreat is not an option. Every loss will feed narratives written long before the first shot. Tension crystallizes into inevitability. Orders circulate quietly: prepare for sustained engagement, conserve ammunition, hold at all costs. No one believes help will arrive. The situation has shifted from disadvantage to fatalistic acceptance. The enemy offensive approaches. The regiment, undermanned and undersupplied, braces for confrontation they cannot avoid yet refuse to yield to. Continuous enemy contact stretches the regiment beyond planned endurance. Rotations lengthen until rest becomes symbolic rather than restorative. Cohesion erodes as exhaustion replaces strategy with reflex. Medical shortages turn minor wounds into permanent disabilities. Medics ration supplies, choosing which injuries receive treatment. The arithmetic of survival becomes an unspoken rule. Every bandage or dose of morphine must justify its use. Operational strength declines daily. Loss of personnel amplifies the burden on remaining squads. Tasks once divided among 10 now fall to 5. Fatigue reshapes judgment, producing errors that cost lives. The tempo of enemy attacks leaves no space for recovery. Losses compound until death becomes a logistical factor rather than an event. Mail stops arriving. Families become abstractions remembered rather than reached. The emotional gap between the front and home expands, reinforcing isolation. Soldiers begin to measure time only by the sequence of attacks they endure. Leadership attempts to stabilize morale. Speeches and orders emphasize endurance and discipline, but actions from higher command undermine those words. Requests for relief are postponed. Replacement shipments are redirected. Each decision signals mistrust wrapped in procedure. Among the ranks, frustration evolves into perception of injustice. Soldiers interpret the neglect not as accident but as design. They understand that their suffering fits a pattern consistent with the system that created it. The realization does not destroy discipline, it redefines it. As casualties mount, internal bonds strengthen. Shared loss becomes the only structure that holds. When experienced NCOs fall, younger soldiers step into command roles overnight. Tactical efficiency suffers but collective purpose intensifies. The regiment begins to function less as an assigned unit and more as a self-contained body driven by obligation to those already gone. Reports from reconnaissance confirm enemy consolidation for a major strike. The knowledge adds psychological weight. They understand what is coming and how little they have left to meet it. Some find resolve in defiance. Others operate through routine, unwilling to surrender rhythm even when meaning fades. Leadership recognizes that emotional collapse could spread faster than enemy fire. To prevent that, they tighten procedures. Shorter briefings, fewer discussions, focus only on immediate tasks. Every casualty now carries symbolic consequence. Each death threatens not just the line but the reputation of the entire regiment's legacy. The pressure fuses personal survival with collective dignity, leaving no separation between the two. Despite loss and exhaustion, the regiment holds. Every hour of endurance contradicts enemy expectations. Their endurance deserves remembrance. Subscribe and stay with Battlefront Insider to honor the sacrifice that history nearly forgot. The regiment reaches a breaking point where endurance alone can no longer sustain survival, forcing a decision that will redefine their purpose. Intelligence confirms the enemy is assembling for its largest coordinated assault. No reinforcements are available. Higher command cites logistical impossibility. The regiment must stand with what remains. Officers weigh two outcomes. Holding position risks annihilation. Withdrawing risks disgrace. Each carries consequence measured not only in lives but in perception. The debate unfolds in orders and reports rather than words. Signals of uncertainty within a structure expected to project confidence. Some propose pulling back to secondary lines to preserve fighting strength. Others argue that such movement would validate entrenched prejudice. The moral burden exceeds tactical reasoning. Every possible choice carries accusation. Calculations shift toward endurance. They know casualties will rise exponentially if they stay, but retreating would fracture the defensive network across the sector. Failure here would expose nearby units, possibly altering the campaign itself. The ethical conflict extends beyond battlefield logic. Many soldiers understand that history will remember actions selectively. They have been fighting not just the enemy in front of them but a narrative waiting behind them, one that expects failure. Amid pressure, the regiment reframes its objective. Instead of waiting for orders, they begin to plan actions that will seize initiative. Intelligence officers outline terrain advantages unnoticed by previous command. Artillery specialists coordinate fields of fire without external approval. Fragmented authority begins coalescing into deliberate intent. Morale stabilizes around a single principle: control what can be controlled. The decision forms gradually without announcement. The regiment will not withdraw. It will redefine its assignment into opportunity. This shift marks a moral and strategic pivot. Choosing to act rather than endure transforms frustration into purpose. Each officer understands the cost but accepts it as the only path to reclaim agency. As night approaches, preparations begin for a move that will contradict every expectation, enemy, ally, and command alike. They are about to take an action that could either restore faith or confirm every doubt ever cast upon them. A hidden plan begins forming beneath the surface of exhaustion, but its full scope and risk remain unrevealed. Officers finalize a plan built around terrain long ignored in defensive planning. Maps identify a sector considered low value by Japanese intelligence and impractical by American logisticians. The regiment sees opportunity where both sides see irrelevance. This decision grants them an advantage unaccounted for in any projection. They reduce equipment to essential loads, accepting the trade-off between firepower and mobility. Every movement is calculated to avoid detection. Scouts guide the columns through routes that minimize exposure. The regiment advances without broadcasting intention, shifting the geometry of the battlefield through deliberate repositioning. Their new positions allow control of angles that disrupt the expected alignment of the Japanese assault. By choosing high ground approaches and concealed intervals, the regiment establishes firing lanes unknown to enemy planners. These placements challenge the logic behind the coming offensive. Command structures adapt to the maneuver. Squads are reorganized to match the new configuration. Support weapons are distributed to maximize overlapping arcs of engagement. The regiment becomes an interlocking network of planned responses rather than a static line awaiting pressure. This reshaping of their role builds internal confidence. Uncertainty fades as responsibility transforms into purpose. Soldiers recognize that they are no longer reacting to circumstance, they are shaping it. The plan's secrecy ensures neither neighboring American units nor Japanese reconnaissance can predict the shift. As night settles, final adjustments are made. Weapons are checked, fallback routes identified, and communication signals simplified. The regiment settles into its new form, ready to engage from a position created through initiative rather than assigned through policy. They wait for the enemy assault from a position no one expects. The Japanese offensive begins with coordinated infantry pushes aligned with their original assumptions. Formations advance toward the defensive line they believe still exists. Instead, they encounter fire from angles not accounted for in their plan, disrupting the first wave's momentum. The regiment experiences immediate strain. Ammunition is consumed at a rate beyond projections, forcing rapid redistribution across squads. Communication becomes critical as leaders balance the need to hold ground with the necessity of managing dwindling resources. Casualties rise on both sides. Each loss reduces squad cohesion, tightening the margin for error. Still, the regiment maintains its positions, using its new configuration to counter repeated advances. The uncertainty of the outcome intensifies. Every decision carries risk and every delay threatens collapse. Pressure escalates. The Japanese adjust their approach, testing the regiment's endurance through persistent assault rather than concentrated force. This tactic stretches the defenders thin, creating moments where the line nearly fails. The regiment holds, but the cost becomes increasingly evident. The first phase of the assault ends, but the broader outcome remains uncertain. News of the regiment's unexpected success reaches both sides of the island. Japanese units coordinating secondary attacks slow their advance, unsure why the primary assault has stalled. This confusion spreads through communication chains, weakening overall cohesion. American command receives conflicting reports. Initial disbelief gives way to recognition as field officers confirm the regiment's effectiveness. Reinforcement priorities shift subtly as the defensive grid stabilizes. Adjacent sectors, previously at risk of collapse, regain operational balance due to reduced pressure. Supply networks seize the opportunity created by the regiment's stand. Engineers and drivers push through routes previously inaccessible, restoring limited but vital resource flow. The defensive structure, once fragmented, begins to reconnect. The Japanese leadership halts further major actions to reassess their approach. This pause provides crucial time for American forces to reorganize and secure vulnerable positions. As information circulates, the scale of the regiment's impact becomes apparent. Their decision reshapes not only their sector but the trajectory of the broader campaign. Stories shaped by turning points like this deserve attention from those who seek deeper understanding of historical consequence. Enemy planners prepare a new response shaped by higher stakes and reduced margin for error. Japanese command, confronted with unexpected resistance, orders repeated assaults to reclaim momentum. These attacks are launched with urgency rather than precision, reflecting growing internal doubt. Each wave suffers heavier losses than anticipated. Casualty reports rise sharply. Planners recognize that projections based on racial assumptions produced flawed expectations. The regiment's cohesion contradicts those assumptions, forcing reassessment across multiple intelligence branches. Captured documents reveal confusion among Japanese officers. Reports describe the regiment as disciplined, coordinated, and unyielding, qualities their doctrine insisted would be absent. This irony destabilizes confidence within lower-level commands tasked with justifying continued offensives. On the American side, skepticism erodes as evidence accumulates. Officers who previously questioned the regiment's capacity begin redirecting resources toward them, recognizing their sector as central to the defensive effort. The shift carries strategic implications, altering supply distribution and communication priority. Internal military reports emphasize the regiment's role in halting the offensive. Analysts highlight their initiative, positioning, and endurance as decisive factors. These findings circulate upward, challenging assumptions embedded in policy. As Japanese losses surpass 12,000, the attacking division loses its ability to mount coordinated large-scale operations. Fragmented units attempt isolated pushes but lack the organizational strength to break through. The collapse of their offensive capability marks a permanent shift in the campaign's trajectory. Both systems, Japanese military doctrine and American racial policy, are forced into indirect confrontation with the results. The regiment, expected to falter, becomes a defining factor in the island's defense. With enemy strength broken and assumptions overturned, the course of the conflict changes irreversibly, setting the stage for resolution and legacy. With the failure of the final offensive, Japanese forces withdraw from the sector and abandon their attempt to break the island's defensive line. The pressure that defined the regiment's existence for weeks lifts not through celebration, but through the simple fact that the enemy can no longer continue. The regiment secures its positions, holding ground that had been measured earlier in doubt and later in loss. Their lines remain intact despite the toll exacted on every company. After-action reports begin circulating through American command. Analysts note the regiment's discipline under sustained pressure, the precision of their repositioning, and the effectiveness of their improvised tactical network. These accounts show clear cause and effect. Decisions made within the regiment shaped outcomes far beyond their assigned role. Commanders who once questioned their capabilities now cite them as the reason the island chain remains in Allied hands. The regiment's performance enters discussions about the future of segregated units. Officers begin referencing this battle when reviewing training, deployment, and eligibility criteria. Although policy does not change overnight, the event becomes evidence too substantial for planners to ignore. The regiment's endurance creates a foothold in institutional memory, where facts gradually outweigh assumption. Inside the unit, recognition does not take the form of ceremony. Soldiers acknowledge what was achieved through the continued function of their companies, the preservation of their positions, and the return to regulated rotations. Their dignity emerges not from praise but from the knowledge that they shaped the outcome through collective resolve. Long before their story reaches public awareness, the regiment's legacy grows within the quiet exchanges of staff meetings and strategic evaluations. Their contribution shifts from contested possibility to established fact. Their achievement stands, but the deeper meaning of what they proved still waits to be articulated. The regiment's endurance exposes a fundamental truth about warfare. Assumptions, when left unchallenged, distort planning as sharply as any tactical error. Japanese doctrine, shaped by racial bias, created a model of the battlefield that could not withstand contact with reality. Their offensive collapsed not solely from force, but from belief in flawed intelligence that underestimated human capability. On the American side, the regiment's experience reveals the gap between institutional narrative and lived reality. Policy framed them as auxiliary, yet their actions proved essential. Their performance becomes a direct consequence of opportunity denied elsewhere. When pressed beyond reasonable limits, they demonstrated a capacity that had never been measured fairly. Their choices under extreme strain offer a broader lesson. Responsibility does not fade under pressure, it sharpens. Integrity is not a product of recognition, it emerges from action. The regiment's decision to hold, adapt, and seize initiative illustrates how individuals and groups redefine themselves when structures fail to acknowledge their value. Beyond the specific battle, the story establishes a universal assertion. Imposed limitations rarely reflect actual potential. Human capability is not fixed by expectation, reputation, or assumption. It is revealed through the decisions made when consequences are unavoidable and outcomes matter beyond the individual. The meaning formed through their struggle leads directly to a quiet call for continued attention to histories once left at the margins. The regiment's stand shaped the course of the campaign and altered the expectations placed upon countless soldiers who followed. Their endurance, forged under structural doubt and relentless pressure, offers a record of what determination achieves even when recognition is limited. Their story adds clarity to a wider history still being understood. If you want to continue exploring accounts that correct the record and honor those who carried burdens larger than their acknowledgement, subscribe and stay connected to the work we do here. This is Battlefront Insider, where we reveal the human stories behind every war.